Welcome to the Family Law Growth Podcast. We interview the nation's fastest growing family law firms to get insights on what is working today. We leave no stone unturned, from intake to the biggest mistakes they've made while scaling to multi-7 figures and 8 figures. I'm your host, Elliot, co-founder of Empirical 360. Let's dive into the episode. All right, so welcome to the next episode of the Family Law Growth Podcast. I am joined by the one and only Heather O'Connor. So if there's ever a rocket ship firm, this is it. So pay attention to this episode because these people, I've just never seen anything like it. So Heather, can you intro us, who you are, what you do, all that fun stuff?
Sure, absolutely. My name is Heather O'Connor. I own O'Connor Family Law. We are a divorce and custody firm, which we do the Jerry Springer of family law. You know, it's the chairs are flying, the F-bombs are dropping. We do really high conflict family law work in Massachusetts.
So you're one of the few, I feel like, that really does high conflict. Why do you do high conflict? And are you crazy, pretty much, is what probably the audience wants to know, right? It's the hardest stuff.
So yes, I put myself in the crazy category. And I think you have to be a little bit, but it comes really from my own past experience of why I got into law in the first place, what I experienced, and through my professional career, really realizing that there was a need for this area of law for attorneys who knew how to fight and could fight really, really well, but also before they got to the fight, really understood how to de-escalate a situation, as well as understand the trauma that a lot of attorneys can put people who are coming out of domestic violence situations, control, manipulation. If you don't do it correct, you basically make somebody relive through that trauma. And those were all things that I wanted to be able to fix based on my own experience.
So because I feel like it'll relate to a lot of the questions, can you give us a 10,000 foot view of what you went through? Because I feel like it's probably one of the craziest stories I've ever heard personally. And I know that it shapes a lot of how you guys do what you do. And the other questions I'll ask, it'll come back, I think, for the audience to understand like how you guys function. So 10,000 foot view, what happened to you? Why did you start that?
Sure. So back years and years and years, I got married really, really young, had 3 children. My marriage had turned abusive. It turned into a situation where I knew it wasn't healthy. But and it was really interesting because there's a TikTok going on right now, and somebody just posted something that I said where it really takes about 7 times to get out of an abusive situation. And that's just an average. There's some people that stick it out a lot longer than that. And so I had finally come to the decision that I needed to leave. And I said to my ex-husband, this is not a healthy relationship. We need to end it. I think we need to get a divorce. And he looked at me and said, if you leave me, I will make sure that you have nothing, that you will have no home, you will have no money. I will make sure your children hate you, and you'll be lucky to sleep on a park bench. And with that threat, I believed him. I believed he held this power. And so I continued to stay. And it wasn't until he ended up getting arrested for another instance of domestic violence, and he was being taken away by the police. And the police came to me and said, ma'am, your 4-year-old's out in the front, skipping around the yard, singing, my daddy got arrested, my daddy got arrested. We need to talk to him because this is not normal. So they did. And when they came back, that was my line in the sand where they said, we asked him if he understood why his father was getting arrested. And he said, yeah, because my daddy hurt my mommy like he hurts me. And that opened a whole can of worms for me. It made me see things very differently because before that, I was doing what I thought was best for my children, even if it meant putting myself in a situation that I knew wasn't great. But with that change, obviously came a big old divorce that was incredibly high conflict. And the divorce process sucks. Like it's not really set up to help people flourish. In fact, a lot of times it makes things so much worse. And I looked at all of that and thought, something's got to change. I knew I needed to change because I had no money and I thought all lawyers were rich. So I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to become a divorce attorney. I'm going to open a firm and I am going to change the way that divorce is done so people can actually not have the experience I had. And that's exactly what I did.
Yeah, and for, like, what always strikes me about you guys, like, your firm too, is it's so heavy mission driven, and it matters, I think, throughout every step of the I mean, well, we're talking about client acquisition here, but just every step of the process, you feel it in your brand, and so when I ask those questions later, I just want the audience to know, like, this is what a mission driven firm really, really looks and sounds like. So can you tell the audience, like, where are you at now, like, as far as headcount, like, firm, like, structure? What does that look like currently?
Sure. So I opened in 2016 my own firm. Started with me in my living room, or actually, it was like my home office or whatever. And now we've grown to, we have a team of 25, I believe, with 12 attorneys. Revenue wise, we're at a $6.5 million run rate. And the numbers sound fantastic, but really what that does is basically drives us even more. We just opened a pro bono division. It allows me to put the effort into my team. We go on trips every year because my team is my family. So it's making people's lives better, not only on the client side, but also within our firm.
All right, so I hope you're enjoying this episode. So, if you're struggling to grow your family law firm right now and you've tried marketing and you've tried sales and nothing seems to be clicking, it's more than likely that you have a benchmark problem. You actually don't know what winning looks like and what the KPIs are that you need to manage to. So, that is why we put together this benchmark report. So this report goes over a bunch of stuff. It tells you what should PPC leads cost, what should LSA leads cost, what should those leads close at, what should you be doing for social media, how should you structure your sales process, who should do your intake, should you do paid consults or free consults. All of these questions that are potentially holding you back from growth are answered in this short guide. Now, as a bonus, when you get this guide mailed to you, I also give you an intake script that you can give to an internal person or a call center. I also give you the agenda of how non-attorney salespeople open their call, and I give you the closing questions that they use to close more deals. So go ahead, get this for free. All you gotta do is put in your information and I will mail you a physical copy. Let's get back to the episode. When you first started coming up in the firm, was it always you just gravitated towards domestic violence stuff? Was it just normal divorce? And how did you get clients in the beginning? Like, what was that process like for you?
Yeah, for me, from the day I decided I want to be an attorney, and I had to go to community college, undergrad, law school. So it wasn't like I had an entire college degree and could just be like, oh, I'll go to law school now. I had to work from the bottom. I was so laser focused on what I wanted to do. Every time, because from going from community college to undergrad, I remember sitting down and being like, what degree gets me out of here quickest? Like, whatever it is, that's what I'm going to do. And I ended up with a sociology major, and people would be like, oh, what are you going to do? I'm like, I'm going to be an attorney. So I knew exactly what I wanted. It was around the same time that my case, no, my space, that's what it was. My space came out. And I just started using that as kind of a journal where I talked about what I was going through, the ups, the downs, what my goals were. And it really started gaining a following. And throughout my entire law school career, I was very open about what I was dealing with, both because my high conflict crap like kept going on and only stopped recently because all my kids are now emancipated. But it was something I was very passionate about. I put out there and people followed me where before after I graduated, but before I started practicing, because I clerked for 2 years, I constantly would get people reaching out saying, you know, are you representing people yet? Like, I know somebody going through a divorce. I want to refer them to you. So then when I joined a firm, I was actually bringing in more of my own clients than the firm was giving me. And at
Wow.
one point it was just, okay, this is the time that I think I'm ready to do this on my own. I had enough experience at this point. I knew I had the passion. I knew by that point I had the relationships with people. And so when I left, I was terrified that I wasn't going to be able to support myself. I wasn't, I was going back to the days where I was eating my kids' peanut butter, like the crust off the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And All of my clients came with me, and I think it was because of the relationship I built, and building that relationship is what I'm constantly are you know, with every attorney that comes in, you build a relationship, you express the empathy, you put yourself in their shoes. They are not just a client, like they are a person, and our job is to make sure that they get out of this successfully so that they can have success in their life.
Crazy. So you were like an OG social media person and like
Before
and
I even knew it though, really.
yeah, I know. So what type of stuff did you share? Was it just like exactly what you were going through or like was it motivational stuff? Like was there a strategy or you were just kind of like doing it as a therapeutic thing and it just so happened to bring clients?
At the beginning, it I was really just using it like a journal. Like it wasn't meant as my social media strategy now, which I know a lot more about it. It was more almost like I was putting it out there to hold myself accountable, as well as just I was going to be real. A lot of going through law school, a lot of my life sucked. And I didn't, it wasn't this social media that was this fluffy, everything's fantastic. And here I am in law school and life is great. It was very real. And I think that connected early and was one of the things that really influenced me this entire time. And I think has been part of my success is that I say it like it is.
Yep.
I don't sugarcoat things. I don't pretend they're better than they are. If I'm going through crap, you're going to know about it. And I think people really appreciate that because everybody goes through crap.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think that's such a like I mean, if you have a message like that, especially, just being real really will attract the right people, even if for you it's, like, unintentional, but so, like, now how does your brand? Because I feel like you definitely have a very strong message. What role does that play in attracting the ideal clients? Like, do you get all your ideal clients, or is it, like, rare to get domestic violence, like or do you get a lot of normals and you get a lot of domestic violence? Tell me about your
I
brand
liked
and,
how
like,
you
your strategy.
compared like domestic violence and then you're normal.
Well,
Like,
like, your
screw you.
typical divorce, like,
No, I
amicable.
got what you're saying.
I'll start saying amicable from here on out, that's a better one.
I call them friendly divorces.
There you go, friendly divorces. So, do you get, like, a healthy mix of friendly versus domestic violence? Do you get all the ones all the heavy stuff, or what is your brand like, how does it work?
I mean, I think we're known for high conflicts, so we definitely attract that. It's very nice, and we do get a good number of amicable divorces, mediations. The things that aren't the daggers flying across the table. So we get a big mix of everything. But the high conflict, I think, those are the things when somebody comes in and they are the underdog. That's my people. Like those are the people that I get passionate about representing. And even strategizing some of our attorneys cases when I start hearing the stories, I'm like, yeah, let's take them down. Like there's nothing I love more than seeing somebody who has abused somebody, who has manipulated somebody, who has controlled somebody, get to make them pay. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like fun. So when you started, like, you had this strong brand, obviously a super strong story, and you've used social and just all the stuff to get it out there, right? I think stories are really what help people understand and relate. When did you make or did you make the switch to like, I really want to grow this thing? What was like the aha moment for you where it's like, okay, I'm a lawyer, but now it's let me do some business side of the things too. What did that look like?
It was really corresponded and at the same time that I decided to open. I had learned all the basics of the law. I was very confident in my own litigation, but I knew I had no clue how to run a business. They didn't teach you that in law school. I did sociology. I didn't do business, like I didn't major in business. So I had no background whatsoever except for I had done like an MLM through Beachbody, which taught me a ton about building relationships and about building a really strong network. And that was incredibly helpful, but still very different than a law firm. So I immediately got into business coaching. I partnered with different companies, and that's really where it built the foundation for the business. I knew I wanted to be an empire. I didn't want to be a solo practice. I didn't want to be a small firm. Like, I want to eventually compete with Boston firms and big firms. And so building that was something I knew really needed a strong foundation, and you turn to the experts when you need help. So
So when you say business coaching, was it legal specific? Was it general business? Was it both? Like, do you
it
do
was
all of them? Like, what is
it
your go-to?
I've I've done a lot because I actually got audited by the IRS because of how much money that I put into development. And I was explaining it to the woman because she couldn't understand why I was paying so much money. And she goes, "But you already did school." And I said, "Yes, but I did law school. I didn't do business school." So if you think of it, like, I'm just paying to go to business school while I'm building the business. And then she goes, "Well, when are you going to be done? When are you going to graduate?" And I was like, "Yeah, if everything goes according to plan, never."
Yeah.
But yeah, it was so it's typically law. Everything that I've used has been very law firm focused.
Okay.
Um, but I've also done different things just with business because I think there's a lot of teaching out there that you can take that other companies are doing and apply to law firms, even though we have all those extra ethical considerations.
So for people listening, right, let's say that they're on the fence of because there's so many coaching programs out there, right? And you're always a little bit like, well, do I have you ever gone through one where you're like, that was a giant waste of money, or do you always get nuggets? Like, do you feel like there's ever been, and I'm not saying name them, I'm saying like if people are on the fence of like, is this really worth it? What would you say to those people?
I'd say yes, as long as you are open to learning. If you walk in anywhere, it could be the best coaching place in the world. If you walk in thinking, what are they really going to teach me? I know everything. Then yeah, you're probably wasting your money. But if you walk in, I've learned things from people that I just sit down and have coffee with because I walk in open to learn. And so when people have an understanding and have been able to help other people build where you want to go, why wouldn't you listen to them? And anything, you hear the same thing. You can hear it from different people. You hear it maybe the fifth time, but it's said just a little bit differently and it hits home. So if you're open to learning, I don't think you can go wrong. And I've never fortunately had the experience where I felt, oh, that was a waste of time.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's my general feeling too, is like you always get a nugget or two, or at the very most of them will pay for themselves, I feel like. So like for people, who are especially in family law, I feel like is one of the hardest practice areas to get out of legal production and become a business owner. What did that look like for you? Are you still doing some? Do you still love doing some? Like, what does that evolution look like? And when did you realize, okay, I can't always be a full-time lawyer. I got to run the business a little bit.
Um, that was an incredibly hard process. Even now, I'm a litigator at heart. I love the thought of the courtroom. I love being in the courtroom. I love making people cry on cross. Like, I love it all. But what I found is I also really, really love running the business and growing and helping other people achieve their best. And so it was a period of time where it was not only me stepping out of the litigation, but with that, retraining everyone because I had been putting myself out there. It was my story that was out there. It's my name on the firm. And that transition of having people call to hire me versus calling to hire somebody in the firm was a really challenging thing and probably took us about 2 years to master it. And now my entire team knows exactly what to say to make somebody not want to hire me. So
Are you willing to share what that thing is? Is it just the legal team angle, or is it a little harder than that because of your story and how polarizing that is?
It's a little harder than that, but the easiest thing is we just raised my rate so incredibly high that most people hear it and they're like, "Oh yeah, we'll take somebody else."
Yeah.
Some people are willing to pay it, and every time I'm like, "Why?"
You're, like, happy and upset all at the same time. So what did the actual, like, tactical steps look like for you to get out? If it took you say it took you, like, 2 years, was it you didn't have the enough cases coming in to feed somebody else, and then you, like, take what was the hurdle, and what did you do to get over it?
The hurdle was me. I love litigation. You
Okay,
know,
okay, so you just didn't wanna get out of the game.
it was it was a feeling of loss almost. Like I love what I know the client care that I bring somebody. I know how I run a case. And it was almost like a fear, I think. It was definitely an internal thing where giving that up completely, I had to trust the people that I had on my team. And I remember sitting down with my director of operations and them looking at me being like, Heather, what are you going to do? You got to pick one. So you're either going to be the CEO or you're going to be a lawyer. If you're going to be a lawyer, we need to hire a CEO. If you're going to be a CEO, I mean, we can hire more lawyers because we've done really well with that. And that was a decision I made, that the my ultimate goal meant more to me than my immediate desire.
And that was just more help, more reach, more that type of stuff. So,
It's just
when
growing. Like
yeah,
I
when you
never
decided to do that, you were like, "Alright, fine. I gotta be the CEO." How did you get out? Like, of the gang, it almost sounds like over there, right? Like, how did you finally make it out and then shed those litigation duties?
oh, how did you make it out? Like I
Yeah, I'm
escaped
telling you, I feel
prison.
like you're escaping from the gang is how it sounds.
It was I just stopped taking cases. Where there's still been a couple, like if anything comes in that's over 300 million, I will usually end up with that still. Or there's some cases where, I mean, they pull at my heart and I hear the story and I'm like, ah, but you almost have to become a little cold, I think, and not in a bad way, but just in a way where we are at the point now, and me growing the business, the one thing I do, I'm a great litigator, I'm a great CEO. I don't do both well at the same time. And acknowledging that, I think, was like my first step. If
Yeah,
we want to compare it to like the 12 steps of recovery, it was the first step of saying, you know, I can do this well, I can do this well, I can't do both. So I need to let the people who I have hired and that I trust because I've trained them to do their job. And that, it was really letting go of a lot of control.
yeah, yeah, definitely, and especially if you love litigation too, that plus the control is really tough.
Because I've
So
heard people be like, I hate litigation. I can't wait to get out. I'm like, well, you'd make my decisions so much easier.
yeah. So do you still have a hand in looking at what the attorneys are doing? Or, like, what was that phase out? Did you, like, initially in the early non-trusting days where you're like, "Alright, let me just see what everybody's doing, and I'm still managing them." Do you now have somebody else do that? What does that look like?
Yeah, so that's all been a progression as well, where we brought in a managing attorney. It was me and her. It got to the point where you can't oversee everything as it gets so big, but the quality and the level of care that I expect didn't change. So I'm not willing to compromise the value that we give clients just because we're growing. And so for me, it got to the point where I was heavily involved in working with each attorney on the strategy of the case, but then I was getting nothing else done. So then the managing attorney came in, she took half of that over. Then as she continued to grow and get better at it, she took all of it over. Now we're in the process of bringing back in a supervising attorney, but we're doing it right this time. We tried it once, it didn't work out as well as we had hoped. Where if all goes according to plan, then I should be completely out of production.
Nice. So and I honestly love this too, is like if you let go too quickly, it's like especially with cases like yours where it's high stakes, the quality can slip, and I'm tend to be a little bit more on the control freaky side too of like, I want this to be perfect, right? So I totally get that. So for people listening, it is possible to get yourself out, and there's phases. Some people do it very fast. I guess you did a little bit over the course of 2 years, you said, right?
Of getting of backing out to, I think I'm down. I've had cases that I've just had for forever and I'm not giving them up. I'm seeing them through to the end. Um, but I think I'm down to 4 cases right now.
Nice. So almost there. So I feel like, and I don't always go into this in these episodes, but you've done a really good job of this, especially very quickly, it seems. How do you find attorneys? People find this to be one of the most challenging things, and you have a pretty big attorney team. So, like, what is your process for that? Are they attracted to the story? Is that told to them? Do they know what they're getting into? Like, what does that look like for you guys?
That has also evolved as we've gotten bigger. And The one thing I have noticed is the bigger you get, the easier it becomes because your name gets out there, people start looking at you, and it creates the same thing as it does when you market. You know, the more you're out there, the more branded you are, the more trust people have. So I get people now that are going through law school and find me because they're passionate about family law, and they start making those connections where they want to come work for the firm. Now, obviously, those are newer attorneys that don't give us the experience, but I mean, we do it just like everybody else. We put what is out there that's really important to us, and then we look for people that fit our culture. We can teach skill. We can't teach personality. We can't teach dedication. We can't teach passion. So that's really what we're looking for. But I mean, if you go back, I've almost removed I am an absolutely horrible hirer because I look at everyone and just see their potential, and it resulted in us hiring, which my team refers to as baby birds that fell out of the tree. And I've hired based on what I think somebody can do, and some of that stems just I needed somebody to give me the chance, and I knew what I could do. I just needed that break. You know, I needed somebody to say, "Oh, you've got little kids, you have no experience. Yeah, we'll give you that shot." And so I think recognizing that that's what I do and putting people that do it better than me in the position to do it has really worked for us.
I mean, that's one of those other things where you gotta recognize that problem in yourself of like, "Yeah, I'm kinda giving everybody a chance and it's killing us." So, how do you in the earlier days when you didn't have the momentum, how did you find attorneys? Was it like job? Because a lot of people just think like, it's so hard to find them, but they don't necessarily put in a ton of effort. Did you have to put in effort, or was it just kinda they were attracted to the early story from the MySpace days?
Um, a lot of my early hires were people that just knew me, some people that I went to school with, some people that watched me. Um, I think I remember advertising on Craigslist. I actually found some really, my director of operations came through Craigslist. They've been with me for, I think, 8 years now. So I think don't leave any stone unturned. You know, you can find people in places where nobody else is looking. So don't be afraid to do that.
There you go. Get scrappy, right? So to transition into like client acquisition, right? Because it's the Family Law Growth Podcast. Um, and there's a lot of firms, and I'm excited about this because there's a lot of firms who don't do the friendly divorces, or they do high end divorces, or they do high conflict, and they don't believe that a salespeople can do it, and then b if you are using salespeople, how do you still protect the firm, right? So I really want to dig into like your stuff. So like as far as your sales process, what does that look like at a 10,000-foot view? What happens when somebody calls a firm and then, let's go friendly divorce. What happens with a friendly divorce? And then we'll go to the high conflict stuff.
Yeah, everybody goes through the same process in my firm. So each person is treated equally. Essentially, obviously, we have all our marketing out there. We put it out for a particular type of person. The people that I look for really are people, maybe they haven't had the best situation, but they can take accountability for where they've been, because then they're coachable. You know, they're people that we can work with, that we can actually help improve their lives. And that's our end goal. You know, it's not just the legal result, it's taking somebody and actually changing their life. And so when I started, it's a lot of times, people call in and they're thinking about divorce. I mean, obviously, sometimes you get the people that they call in and they've just been served, so they need to hire. Maybe they're at their breaking point, so they need to hire. But I find family law to be, the sales process is much more cultivating than those immediate sales. And so having attorneys do that, not really the best, where the attorneys, the way our comp plans are set up, are heavily based off of their collections. So if they're giving away a lot of their time for free, they're either taking away from their time to actually represent the people who are paying us, or they have no work life balance because they have to make things up. So for me, it just made sense to have somebody who wasn't an attorney, to build that relationship, get to know somebody, figure out if they were the right fit for us, because we do not take everybody that calls, and then walk through that process. as well as all the red flags that we've set out for the people that we don't want. You know, that our sales team are the protectors of our attorneys.
So how do you get like a client engagement, or I think you guys are client onboarding specialists or something like that, right? How do you get them to recognize those red flags, or how do they do that? Because I think that's important to firms of like we want to also protect our attorneys and protect our reputation, and it's a little bit of a balancing act. So how do you get them to be hungry enough to want to make sales because you ultimately need that at the end of the day, but also protect? What do those questions look like, and what do you tell them?
Um, Part of it comes with a longevity bonus. So if they've brought in a case that stays with us for 6 plus months, they get more of a bonus than they would, um, for an onboarding, like a regular onboarding. So that's part of it. But it's also, I believe I hire people who really do believe in our mission and our vision, and that all lines up. It's not just about the number, it's about the experience. And I'm very fortunate where our sales team, which we refer to as the new client development team, they're all these just amazing human beings that really give a shit, and they really want people to be better, whether that's somebody that can retain us or not. But they have very clear directives of what to look for, what's acceptable, what's not. We have things that if you hear something like this should check the box that there's a red flag. If you get so many red flags, they're automatically out. Sometimes it's just gut feeling. You can talk to somebody, and this is also a balancing act, because most people who are calling us for a family law issue are not in the best place emotionally. So some of it, you might get somebody on the phone who's crying and screaming and they're angry, and it's not because they're a bad person, they're just dealing with a bunch of crap. So it's being able to really measure and weigh out, is this somebody who is just dealing with shit, or is this somebody who is maybe on the edge of crazy, that we don't want to be on that side of the table. We want to represent the right side of the table, not the crazy side. So there's a whole bunch of mechanics that go into it. It's a process that we've continued to fix and go back and look at, where every year we look at what was good, what was bad, what can we fix. Which again, on the business side, I find incredibly fun, because it's all about strategy. It's all about, how do we improve, what can we do to keep going without breaking anything.
So clearly, you put a lot of time, energy, and stuff into this because a lot of people just think, "Hey, easy, let's get sales." But these days, if you're competing against a firm like yours, especially, you're really working on it. So how does it function? Lead gets to reception, intake, and then to sales, or and then you guys do lots of, I think, strategy sessions. What does that look like too?
So any person, let's say you're calling our firm, you'd if you called in, you'd hit our reception, who just gets very basic information in case anything drops on the phone. Then it goes into our intake team that gets a little bit more of the information, but the goal is to get you off the phone with our receptionist as quickly as possible, because we want the lines free. So you get to our intake team, who are again trained just as well as our sales team, and they get more of, they make sure it's the right case for us, the right jurisdiction, and just make sure it's a good fit. As long as they check those boxes, then it moves over to our sales team, and this is where we do a case evaluation. And in this, it's really to start building that relationship, to get the background information that the attorneys are going to need to be able to start strategizing a case, but in a way that's free for the person who's calling in, as well as we give quite a bit of information, especially to people who can't retain us, either because they can't afford to, or maybe they're from a different state. We've got resources out the yin yang of different referrals that people can use, different areas. And now we do have the pro bono division, so some of the lower income cases we're still able to keep rather than send off. But we have a huge list of resources for people that really can't afford us.
And so the salesperson will they sell the full thing, or will they sell a strategy session, or sometimes both?
Sometimes both. So a divorce or any sort of new case, as long as the client fits our ideal client, and doesn't show any of those red flags, which some people are really good. I'd be completely lying to say that we haven't had some get through, the cracks, but they're, sorry, I forgot the question for a second, but now I remember. So basically, there's certain cases that they can close on their own and they don't need to actually touch an attorney because we know the foundation is there. Anybody can get a divorce, you know but for some things like a modification, a contempt, anything where you have to show a basis and a foundation in order to file, we want those to go through an attorney first. So then we do a paid strategy session with the attorney. And the goal there is for the attorney, they get all the notes from the intake so they have the entire background. The client doesn't have to regurgitate everything that's been told as long as it's working correctly. And so then the goal there is whether or not it's not focused on sales. It's focused on letting the attorney do what they do well. And that is creating a strategy, creating a pathway, regardless of whether this person retains us or not. What are those next 3 to 5 steps that are really important for them to move their life forward? Then, once they get done with that, the attorney sends all the notes back to the sales team, and the sales team takes it back over. That way, our attorneys can focus on what they've learned, what they do really well, which is practicing law, while our sales team can do what they do really well and help build those relationships and close the clients.
So, what I take away from that, just to lead the audience a little bit, is A, you put a lot of time and energy into this. B, it's just like service first at every step of the way. And that's why you guys are winning, right? Like it's very obvious you just cared every step. Um, and I think just to like hit on it a little more, because I see this so often. Heather says this stuff and her team hears it and they're mission driven because I interact with her team. But if Heather was like, these people are the worst people in the world and they're terrible and they never pay their bills and blah, 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 her team is going to feel that way, right? So like, how do you constantly reinforce them? Or is that more like, I know your head salesperson does a really good job with this too. Was it you trained her up and she has these mission like and values instilled, or how do you continue to hammer those points home? Because I think it's so important for the end user to know that the firm is here to help regardless of the outcome of do they hire, don't they hire? Do you have like weekly calls or what?
A little bit of everything. We're definitely growing, but we still have a very small team feel where we're friends. And everybody who's coming in knows my story because they hear it during the interview. They know our mission. We're very clear. We If somebody is not a good fit, we don't want them here. We don't want to just hire, just like we don't want the bad, I shouldn't say the bad clients. We don't want the clients that we don't want. We don't want people working for us that doesn't fit with the very specific vision that I have. You have to, and I have to believe that you've bought into our vision and our mission in order to be on our team. But everything we do, every conversation we have, always brings up our values are encompassed with the word change, and each of those stands for a different value. When we sign in for a Zoom, it pops up, don't forget change, and lays out the values. And part of our audits within our case management and case procedure is looking in communications, are the attorneys expressing the values within change? Within our quarterly reviews, our everybody on our team has to say what is something you've done in this last quarter that's exemplified one of these values. That to me, a client, we can't control the judges. I wish I could probably charge way more than we do. We can't control the judges. We can't control the outcome. All we can do is our best. And with our best, we can be there for people who are going through a lot of crap. And I've had some of my favorite clients are people and who constantly refer work back to us are people that we didn't get the best legal result. In fact, one particular, we got a really crappy result. But I remember her hugging me at the end saying, I wouldn't have had anybody else do this with me but you. You heard me, you understood me. I know we did our best. That's the most important thing to me. Obviously, we're lawyers, we want the good result. That is a goal. But everything else, people remember how you make them feel. So, life goes on regardless of what your legal outcome is. The the way somebody has treated you through a really hard time in your life, that can change the trajectory of your life.
Heavy mission. Heavy mission. I mean, I just again, and I always look at this from the standpoint, this is just my, marketing, whatever, is if I'm competing against a firm like this, mission-driven firms they just do well because it's so ingrained in the culture, and the salespeople know it, the intake people know it, and it's so important. So, how do you find salespeople that align with this? And, like,
Well, can I just say one more thing before you ask me that
yeah,
question? Because I see this all the time. And because I'm in family law and that's all I've done, I don't know if it's solely family law or if it's every area of law. But people who are trying to grow get so caught up in competition. They get so caught up in what everybody else is doing. I don't give a shit what anybody else is doing. I care about what I do. The only reason I care about what anybody else is doing is because if they're doing it, making it work, guess what? I want to copy them. Why reinvent the wheel? But I see it, I hear it. I was at a conference. It was within the last quarter. I forget exactly when, but they sat somebody who's from my area doing family law at a table with me, and she got up and left and told people, I refuse to sit with my competition. And that to me, that this isn't what we do. This isn't who we are as lawyers. Like, we don't have to compete against each other. We can all win. There's plenty of money out there. There are plenty, you know, the number of people that hate each other, that's not going to change, So there is plenty of work for everybody. We can spur each other on and be cheerleaders for each other without the competition. The competition should be within.
and it should be for the end user to me, right? And I think the reason I say this is because I interface with lots of internal teams, right? And if the people you have working for you don't love A, what they're doing, and B, wanna help people, that should be a red flag because that's
Yeah.
the business that's the business you're in, right? It's a service, we're all in the service-based business, so it should be service first, and I think when that strong mission, I've just seen her people, right, do it, so I think it's so important to know that, like, this is what your people should sound like when they're talking, hopefully. So how do you find salespeople, client engagement people? Like, I think this is a big mystery to a lot of firms. Like, first of all, just doing this without attorneys is a big mystery. But how do you find these people?
So, again, some of my best people are people who have followed me on Facebook for years. And I use my personal Facebook. If I have an opening, I post there because I found that people who follow me understand what we're all about. And when people understand what you're all about, the right people come to you. You attract what you put out there. And so I was incredibly fortunate where I think I was hiring. I don't even remember what the role was, but I wasn't looking for a salesperson. And this this girl, Chantal, she reached out through Facebook and said, I've been following you, and I saw that you're looking, and I'd love to work for you. Now, at this point, I had already removed myself from first phase of hiring, so she went somewhere else. And my director of operations ended up interviewing her and said, Heather, if we don't hire this girl, like, she's you. She is you as a non-attorney. Like, the way she talks, the her what her own mission is and what she wants to accomplish. And then I got on the phone with her and we just clicked right off the bat. So I've been very fortunate where some of my best people have found me, not the other way around.
Nice. So it's always been. I mean, it's awesome to see what a personal brand and story and like what inbound can do on both sides, client and for hiring. So my last question for Heather, which I could talk to Heather all day for her stories and stuff. She's got some crazy ones. What was like the big turning point when you really started growing fast? Like, what was something that really shocked you, or that like really just got that traction going?
So again, small team, we're very close. We hired a supervising attorney and then things just seemed to be off. Everything kind of stalled and plateaued. And looking back, what had happened is I put people in a position and just expected them to do their jobs, which is great. That is what should be happening. But part of a business to be healthy, you need those checks and balances. You need to always be, following up and making sure that people are doing, not to micromanage, but to hold people accountable and show everyone that, look, we expect a level of excellence. We're going to be looking for that. And that's where we are. And so I had come to a conference that you guys put on, and it was all about, do you know, are you listening to your sales calls? Are you, and I hadn't listened to any of that. So it was the first day of the conference. We had the first little meet and greet the night before, where I got our scores, and I was not happy, and our salesperson was not happy with our scores. And so, we were both very much on fire because, again, personal competition. We like to win. We don't want to hear that we're at the bottom. And if we are, we're going to figure out how to fix that. And so the next morning I woke up early and I started listening to some of our strategy sessions. And we had already switched to doing them via Zoom because that way they're recorded. You can go back and look at them for quality assurance. And I actually did that. And what I found was the person who was taking our sales calls, so they'd already gone through the sales process, they had paid a significant amount of money to get on with an attorney whose job was to lead them, again, not necessarily close them, but lead them towards the right path. And what I heard was our supervising attorney telling people that, oh, I don't know, this firm has become very corporate, and there's all these processes and procedures. It's not what I'd do if I ran a firm, but I have to do what they say. And even to the point where, unknowing that these were people that knew me, even it was somebody who came in because they actually know me. She started talking bad about other attorneys, which is something I do not tolerate. We don't need to talk bad about other people to heighten ourselves. You only do that if you're not good enough. And so that was being done, where, because they had had a prior attorney, this person started talking very negatively about the prior attorney, and they stopped her and said, no, 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 we liked our attorney. Like, we were happy. They're just not practicing law anymore. And so it was everything that makes me like shrivel up and die inside. And immediately, I think it was within the first 30 minutes of the conference, I terminated that relationship. And with that, it was almost immediate, where it was a sense of I can't say the word. It was that family feel came back. Things seemed to run better, and we just had explosive growth.
So, like, for people, what was the big takeaway there? Like, check your process, or like, and like, what could they experience if something like that seems like a pretty small thing. Like, okay, you got this one person who's kind of like whatever, they're doing this, but like, what did that translate into for you guys?
Well, it translated, I mean, everything. The communications with the attorneys, the the way that the clients were actually seeing us and then reporting back. The way we look at anybody that comes in, whether they retain us or not, we want them to be a big fan of our firm. We want them to feel as though, regardless of their situation, they were treated with respect, with dignity, with care. Because guess what? They probably know other people who are going through a divorce or going through a custody matter. And if we have done that for them, it's very likely they're going to say, oh, reach out to them. And that is what we've developed. So everything that was important to me came crashing down. So if you're not doing that, if you're not following back up, making sure things are done, it's great. I live by the motto, if if I don't hear about it, I assume everything's going well. Well, that's basically me digging my head in the sand. And I pulled my head out of the sand this year. And I mean, again, even just this past year, our growth, we went through a huge growth spurt.
So, last piece of advice for the audience: you're an attorney, you're stuck in production, and eventually you want to become a business owner. What is your advice to them? Like, it's very chicken and egg, right? They're in this spot where it's like, I can't sell and I can't do production, I can't do this. What would you give them as advice?
be very, very clear about what you want. There's nothing wrong with being a solo attorney. There's nothing wrong with having a small practice. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think sometimes people hear all these growth and revenue numbers, and you feel as though you're never good enough. Figure out yourself, because every other decision that you make is going to it has to be in line with that. And for me, I knew where I wanted to go. I knew where I wanted to grow. And I knew that I was the person standing in the way of that. So I had to remove myself. So if you don't know what your end result is or where you eventually want to go, it becomes very hard to make those decisions, because then you're just guessing.
Yep. That's awesome. Well, thank you, Heather, so much for being on. Hopefully you guys found this episode valuable, and we'll see you on the next episode.